What's up, guys, and welcome back to another 40k Facts on the 40k universe. This time we are diving into the darkness. We will become one with death itself, because it is Konrad Curze's turn. So let's dive into this hellish lore. The Primarch Konrad Curze remembers descending onto the night-shrouded planet called Nostramo. This was due to the chaotic powers scattering the Primarchs away from the Emperor. The Primarch's gestation capsule smashed through urban architecture and impacted the ground with such force that it tunneled through to the planet's core. This cratered pit that was carved into the planet closed over, and the people of the planet regarded it with fear and suspicion. Curze had to dig his way out of the molten metal, and once he got out to the surface, he had no choice but to fend for himself. Unlike other Primarchs, no family took him in. Nostramo was a human-settled world whose sun was dying out, and therefore left the planet in perpetual darkness. Luckily for the planet, its crust contained the mineral adamantium, which allowed mining and refining factories to flourish. The majority of the population lived in poverty, and crime ran almost unchecked. The human population was pretty low due to high rates of murder and suicide. Curze survived his younger years mainly on his wits and determination. He hunted animals for food, but was plagued by visions of a dark, desolate future. He would sleep atop buildings and be lulled by the screams of those victims of the night. When he couldn't find animals to eat, Curze had to kill to survive. The dead were not like him. He was strong, and they were weak. His victims fell easily to his fists, nails, and teeth. And when he couldn't find food, whether it be animal or human, he began to eat the dead. Curze could have easily gave in to the darkness and hate, but instead he began to fight the thugs and gangs of the Underhive. Bodies of his victims would appear mutilated and crucified on buildings. Slowly, the people took notice of the dead, but also saw a decline in crime. A name began to follow his deeds: the Night Haunter, the Avenging Spirit, the Angel of Blind Justice. He became a murderer that murderers feared. Eventually, the scum of the Underhive banded together to kill him, but Curze killed most of his assailants, leaving only a few alive to send a message back. Without arms and without eyes, they wept this message: "I am coming for you." Within a year, crime fell to near zero. His name was no longer a plea for justice, but a cry of terror. Curze went before the aristocracy and gave them a choice: kneel and follow his law, or be destroyed. Some never left the room that day, but the rest knelt before him. Nostramo now belonged to the Night Haunter, and for the first time, Nostramo had their first monarch, the Dark King. Under his rule, the production of adamantine skyrocketed and exports tripled. The world grew prosperous and balanced. No one dared to have more than their neighbor. Eventually, all crime and sin was no more. Curze foresaw the coming of the Emperor in his dreams. The Emperor and his guard landed and marched toward the capital. The sheer radiance of the Emperor's brilliance was too bright for the citizens to look directly at him. Along with the Emperor, 4 Primarchs accompanied him. Rogel Dorn was the first to introduce himself to Curze. The Night Haunter stood silently as visions of Dorn's death flashed before him. Dorn stood in a dark tunnel as 100 murderers stabbed at the Primarch relentlessly. The next Primarch was Logar Aurelian, and his vision was just as grimdark. Psychic fire engulfed the Primarch as his screams filled the burning sky. Ferrus Manus was the third to introduce himself. Again, Curze stood silently as his brother Primarch's head was clutched by his empty eye sockets by an armored hand. The last Primarch was Fulgrim, and his vision was blurry, but he could faintly see a slithering creature and a laugh that Curze would never forget. At last, the golden god stepped forward. As he drew to speak, Curze succumbed to a vision so potent and horrifying that he fell to his knees. He tried to claw his eyes out at the horror, but felt a hand upon his head. Instantly, his pain subsided and his sanity returned. Curze submitted to the Emperor's will, although he knew all too well the horrors to come. Konrad Curze became leader of the 8th Space Marine Legion, which he renamed the Night Lords. They quickly became efficient and relentless, especially since their armor was decorated with images designed to provoke fear in their enemies. The Night Lords were feared so much so that star systems would cease all illegal activities, pay all outstanding debts, and put to death all Xenos and traitors immediately. Curze would have Nostromo's finest become Marines, but secretly he hated his own legion. His Marines would murder and torture their enemies to the point of enjoying it. Instead of restricting these nihilistic tendencies, Curze drove it on, since these atrocities brought peace and obedience through fear. Curze then slowly began to lose control of his legion, and the visions of a dark future increased. An excerpt from Curze to the planet of Lestrania 4. We have received your offer of surrender and reject it. We did not come to receive your supplication, but to enact judgment. The time to surrender has long passed. The verdict is writ by your own hands. Now is the time to die. After Curze saw the visions of the destruction of his legion and homeworld, he turned to his brothers for help, but they paid him little attention, except for Fulgrim. Fulgrim then turned to Dorn, but Dorn insisted that he went and confront Curze about it himself. After he heard the accusations that the Emperor was to blame for the Primarch's death, Dorn was found unconscious and bleeding, with great gouges of flesh missing from his torso. Kneeled above him was Curze, racked with guilt and weeping. Curze was then taken into custody, while a council of Primarchs decided on his fate. Hours later, they reached a decision, but when they came to Curze's holding cell, the Night Haunter was missing. The Imperial Fist's honor guard who was guarding him lay slaughtered. By the time the Primarchs gave chase, Curze had already disappeared into the warp, along with his legion. When Curze appeared out of the warp, he was in orbit above Nostromo. He ordered his legion to perform Exterminatus, and in a blinding explosion of light, the Darkness planet ceased to exist. Curze sent a message to the Emperor explaining his actions. The reasoning behind the destruction of the planet was that in his absence, the people of Nostromo had become violent sinners once again, and that death was their only salvation. He thought the Emperor would acknowledge these actions, but it was the opposite. Curze believed the Emperor to be a hypocrite and a weakling, and thus began his descent into chaos. Before the Emperor could send out Primarchs to capture Curze, he was forced to deal with the betrayal of his beloved son Horus. During the Istvan III atrocity, Konrad Curze aligned with Horus. Before the assault on Istvan, Logar began his rallying speech. When Logar had finished, the first captain, Sevatar of the Night Lords, declared the famous words, "Death to the false emperor." In doing so, he became the first person to utter these words that countless others would shout for millennia to come. Just as the Primarch, Korax of the Raven Guard, Ferris of the Iron Hands, and Vulcan of the Salamanders began to lose hope during the battle, the sun was blotted out by loyalist reinforcements. Konrad Curze's Night Lords, the Iron Warriors and Perturabo, as well as the Word-Bearers of Logar and Alfarius' Alpha Legion, descended to aid the beaten and worn-out Marines. When the Loyalist forces retreated, that's when Horus's trap was sprung. The so-called Loyalist reinforcements opened fire on the retreating Marines, utterly decimating them. The Iron Warriors were completely surrounded and took very heavy losses. Vulcan and Corax took major casualties as well, but couldn't agree on a retreat plan. And before they could come to an agreement, Corax began fighting the heretic Logar, which completely took all of his attention. Corax had the upper hand in this fight and eventually sliced Logar's face with his lightning claws. While the blood blinded Logar, Corax impaled the stomach of the traitor. Just as he was going to deliver the death blow, metal met metal, and eyes as black as death met with Corax's own. Konrad Curze's smile sent shivers down the Ravengard Primarch's spine. Curze's gauntlet gripped Corax's lightning claw in order to not allow him to escape via his jump pack, but Corax fired his pack at full throttle, ripping the claw off but escaping as well. Curze, disgusted at Logar's pitiful state, pushed him towards his legion of word-bearers. The Night Haunter, now completely insane, took the Salamander's Primarch prisoner, and over the span of several months tortured him. He cared not if the physical and mental torture would kill Vulcan. He just wanted the pleasure of inflicting pain. Finally, Vulcan died at Curze's hands, but Vulcan's body would heal itself, and thus would become alive once again. Vulcan was revealed to be a perpetual. For more information on Vulcan, check out the 40 facts on Vulcan himself. Curze began to kill Vulcan in more horrendous ways, beheadings, shooting him at close range with hundreds of bolters. Even throwing Vulcan into the void of space could not permanently kill him. Finally, Curze gave Vulcan a chance to escape. Vulcan was to run an impossible maze, where at the end of it laid the Primarch's Thunderhammer. Vulcan did the impossible and managed to reach his hammer. Luckily, the hammer had a secret teleporter, and Vulcan was teleported to the safety of the ultramarine planet of Ultramar. After Vulcan was lost to Curze, Horus ordered him to try and convince Lionel Johnson, Primarch of the Dark Angels, to Horus's cause. The two Primarchs met with only 2 honor guards accompanying the both of them. At first the meeting went smoothly, but after Curze slandered L. Johnson, he answered back with a merciless blow to the Night Haunter's face, and a brawl erupted. Curze took the upper hand and began to strangle the life out of the lion, but the honor guard intervened and saved his life. Curze let them go this time, but vowed that the next time they meet, only one of them would walk away. When the 2 legions next fought, the Dark Angels ambushed the Night Lords and severely crippled their forces. Curze barely managed to escape with his life. The Night Lords never sided with any of the Chaos Gods specifically, and after Horus's death, they did not flee into the Eye of Terror like the rest of the traitor legions did. Instead, they continued their attack on the Imperium. The Emperor had to order half of the Calidus Temple of Assassins to try and assassinate Curze's life. Legend says that a lone assassin by the name of Mashiach was allowed to infiltrate the Legion's lair and assassinate Curze, but not before he told her this. "Your presence does not surprise me, assassin. I've known of you since your craft entered the Eastern Fringe. Why did I not have you killed? Because your mission and the act you are about to commit proves the truth of all I have ever said or done. I merely punished those who had wronged, just as your false emperor now seeks to punish me. Death is nothing compared to vindication." The kill was never confirmed, although it is believed that Curze wanted to die, because he saw himself as a murderous and corrupt villain, the very thing he sought to destroy. Regardless, his last words are considered one of the Imperium's greatest enigmas in history. The war gear of the Primarch consisted of his artificer armor called the Nightmare Mantle, which was covered in bones of his enemies, as well as their flayed skin. The pair of lightning claws he wields are called Mercy and Forgiveness. They were given these names by the Night Lords, and no one knows their true name. The Widowmakers are Curze's micro-serrated throwing blades that he preferred to use over firearms. There were two parts to Curze's personality: Konrad Curze, the military strategist, ruthless and efficient, and the Night Haunter, the murderous vigilante. His split personality is said to stem from a strain of having visions upon his psyche. Scholars believe that the Emperor's gene seed may not have bonded properly to Curze's genome, and therefore was the reason for his visions of the future. And with that, we have finished the 40 facts on the Primarch of the Night Lords, Konrad Curze. So let me know what you guys thought about this Primarch. And also let me know what you guys want to hear from me next time on 40 Facts of the Warhammer Universe. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And with that, I have been the Sound Alchemist, part of One Mind Syndicate, signing out.